So hello everyone again. My name is Rita McGrath with Columbia Business School. My guest is Shellye Archambeau, who is one of the first real Black leaders in Silicon Valley, was the highest person of color, as I understand it, for many years at IBM. Has been a senior leader, a CEO, has had a really fabled career, and today is on multiple corporate boards, including Verizon and Nordstrom, and has a brand new book coming out called Unapologetically Ambitious. Yep, go see it. And I was normally, if I have authors on, I have their book here, but I don't have it yet because
it's not out yet. That's an early fake copy.
But it comes out October 6th, but don't be a laggard. Go and pre-order it now. That will be great for Shellye, great for the book, and you could see first in line at getting the insights that the book holds. So that being said, I thought, Shellye, maybe just start off by telling folks a little bit about your journey. I mean, clearly with the title of your book, you're not shy about the career progress you've made. I just love to learn more about that.
Absolutely. First, let me just check because the landscapers just started outside a little early. Usually they don't come until noon. Can you guys hear me okay?
I can hear you fine.
All right, let me know. If there ends up with background noise, I can throw on some headphones. The joys of working from home, as everybody knows.
Oh, I know. It's like, it's funny, I have a house phone here, and because we have not yet been able to solve the problem of robocallers, it just rings all day long. And so my friends joke with me, they're like, did you put the dog out in the yard? You know, can you get rid of it?
So true, so true. So yes, I'm one of those unusual people, and then I decided very early in life, I set a goal to be a CEO. And it was one of those things where, frankly, I don't even know that I really knew at the time what that meant. All I knew is that when I was in high school, I loved clubs. You know, I was in French Club, American Field Service, I was in the National Honor Society, I was in Girl Scout, whatever I got involved in, I ultimately ended up running it, either as president or vice president or something, and I enjoyed it. And a guidance counselor told me once that, well, you know, running a business is just like running a club, right? You figure out what you want to do, you get some people lined up and you go do it. And I thought, great, done. I'm going to go be CEO of a company.
Did you have multinationals in mind at the time, or were you a little more modest?
Well, actually, it was when I ended up, my target was IBM. So I went to Wharton, you know, I said, okay, let me go get my business degree, excuse me.
Right.
Let me go get my business degree. And IBM, I went. And so I said, great, I will indeed go become CEO of IBM. And that's what I did. So I actually joined in sales because I'd done the research, and every single CEO at IBM started out in sales. So that must be the path to power.
There you go.
And that's what I did, even though my friends thought I was crazy. How do you come out of Wharton and go be a salesperson? Pardon me. But that's what I did. And then I spent 14 years rising through the ranks, and ultimately running operations in the US as well as overseas. Ended up moving overseas to Japan for that business.
Wow.
Yeah, running a multi-billion-dollar division.
Sorry, they have trouble with me in Japan.
You can imagine. Listen, you can imagine, Rita. As a matter of fact, as a side story, my boss that I was leaving, right? So the job I was leaving to go take this job, he had actually spent a lot of time in Asia working. And I actually talk about this in the book. But he said, all right, how much do you know about Confucius? And I said, wait a minute. If you're trying to tell me something, just tell me. And he said, all right, there's 3 things that are critical to success in business. Okay, I'm ready, right? I'm listening. I'm all of like 36, 37 years old. Pardon me, allergies. And he says, the first is wisdom. That's age. You don't have it, Shellye. Okay, strike 1. 2 is being male. Nope. Strike 2. And I'm thinking, oh my God, there's 3 things that are critical that I have 0 for 2. And then he says, the third is intelligence. And you better figure out how to maximize it. So that was my send-off speech.
Oh, great.
Oh my God.
Did they drill you in Japanese cultural customs?
You know, what happened is, it was interesting. Japan was fascinating. It was so completely different. But because I had been a minority my whole life and my whole career, it actually ended up being an advantage for me because I didn't go through the shock of being a minority. I already knew I was one, and therefore I knew how to act as one. I knew that people weren't going to give me the benefit of the doubt, that they weren't going to assume that everything I've done, comes with me. They weren't, I knew all these things. So I actually ended up being pretty successful pretty quickly, whereas others tended to struggle because they thought everything came with them, right? So
that is so interesting.
Yeah, so I tell women and minorities all the time, take international assignments. You actually have an advantage for the first time because you are a female and because you are a minority. You know what it's like to work in environments in which you are one of only, right? Or different, all those things. So it's fascinating.
One of my early Japan stories, this happened when I was in the doctoral program at Wharton, as it happens. And my professor mentor and I were going off to a conference in Ito City. And the design of the conference was each professor brought either a younger professor or a doctoral student, and then the doctoral student would present their joint work. And it was a developmental kind of thing. It was great. But we're all getting ready to go, we all meet at the Central Japanese Hotel to get on the bus to go to Ito City. And all the Japanese look at us and they're just like horrified. There's some sort of major etiquette issue, right? And they all go off to the corner of this lobby and leaving us kind of standing there. We don't know what's going on. So it turns out that a really strong norm in Japanese academic circles is that doctoral students always carry their professors' bags and belongings, and they handle all the grunt. They're like the Sherpas, right? But there's also an equally strong cultural norm that the men always carry that stuff for the women if they're traveling together. So this produced an incredible crisis of etiquette. What do we do? So the resolution, as it turns out, was I would carry my professor's bags and one of their doctoral students would carry my bags.
Hey,
But you just have all those kinds of moments where you don't expect what's going to be controversial, right?
It's so true. So true. No, it was a great experience.
How long were you over there?
I was over there for 2 years.
2 years, okay.
Yep. And then I got to the point where at that point, my boss worked for Lou Gerstner, the CEO. So I had done really well. Mm-hmm. And there wasn't anybody above me who looked like me. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't clear to me that I was actually going to make it to the CEO. And I said, I really do want to be CEO. That's my goal, but it doesn't have to be IBM. Mm-hmm. So I've done large businesses. I'm not going to go to another large company, but let me take all that I've learned and go build something. Mm-hmm. But I also knew, because I'd done the research, by the way, homework, and this as a professor, homework never ends. You don't stop doing homework just because you finish school. I do homework all the time. Homework is just getting the knowledge so that you can be prepared. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I did the research, and a lot of people who leave big companies stumble a time or two when they go to lead a smaller company. Mm-hmm. Well, as a woman of color, I don't think I have as many strikes at bat. So I've always worked hard to improve my odds for success. Mm-hmm. So I said, all right, let me go take a seat at the table job, a jobs where I'm in the C-suite, work for the CEO, and I get exposure to the board so that I can understand what's so different and improve my odds. Mm-hmm. So I left IBM to be CEO, actually president of Blockbuster.com, which at the time was in its heyday.
I wanted to ask you about that because that was, if I recall, that was a partnership with Enron, right? But the digital part of Enron, I was so curious about what that was like.
Oh man, well, it's interesting. So first, when I got there, it was before the Enron deal done. And we were just launching the website, Blockbuster.com, to at first kind of sell tchotchkes, to advertise movies, those kinds of things. But the idea was ultimately to become the streaming portal for Blockbuster for movies, hence the relationship with Enron. Pardon me, as they were building out, quote, the network. As you know, that never actually happened. But it became clear.
What an interesting story, though.
It was.
Who today would have thought that would be a partnership,
Exactly. It's, anyway, it's wild. But it became clear that Blockbuster didn't really have the vision for the future. And so I worked my way to Silicon Valley. And I was the chief marketing officer and EVP of sales for 2 recently public companies. And then I got recruited to be CEO of what was then Zaplet, which became Metric Stream, which at the time was a very broken company that we managed with an amazing team to actually turn around and turn into a market leader. So I've had a very varied career, all in tech, and really had some exciting experiences.
That sounds wonderful. It just sounds so interesting. So let's unpack a little this whole notion of women being ambitious, right? Because it's controversial, right? So at Columbia, one of the things I do is I teach a course on women in leadership. And one of the things that is very much informing the design of that course is that women and other people in low power positions in companies have this narrower range of acceptable behavior, right? So if you're too pleasant and friendly, you're a lightweight, and if you're too aggressive and assertive, you're abrasive. And can you talk a little about how you navigate that? Because I think you've done it brilliantly, and maybe there's a lot we could learn from you.
Yeah, well, thank you. And you're right. It is a narrow path that women are expected to walk. And a lot of it is because society has norms for what we think of as a woman's role or how women behave. And when you get into business, a lot of times what's expected in business conflicts with what people think of when they think of their mothers, right? Or their sister or whatever it is. So we're put in this really hard position. And what I've found is, frankly, being direct with compassion is what has enabled me, I think, to kind of walk that line. Mm-hmm. So, I will deliver the hard messages. I'll make the tough decisions. I'll do all of that. But I do try to do it in a way that also shows that I'm compassionate about it and supportive right at the end. So, for instance, if I'm giving someone feedback that, listen, right now they're on the wrong path and they need to really deliver. Otherwise, there's going to have to be consequences, right? So I will absolutely say that. But then I'll always end with something like, but I'm sure if you really put your effort to it, you can do it, right? Or, I'm rooting for you to be able to get there. I put something in there that shows that I have compassion and belief, right, in them. Or if it's really tough and I can't even say that, I'll at least end it, believe it or not, with a smile, which is a really silly thing to have to do, but what it does is it softens. It just softens. And people are able to take those things. So I've found that I won't say we, because I'm a woman, but I'm also a person of color, that I don't have, what should I say? That I can't be as direct and frankly harsh as some people are in business. That doesn't work for me. It's not effective. And a lot of business is learning how your style, people should not change their styles, but how to make your style effective. That's really the key. Don't adapt somebody else's style because it's going to seem inauthentic. Just figure out how you take your style and just test it. Try different things to see what tends to work and then hone, right, that overall capability or approach.
So when you talk about the sort of big turning points, right, and one of the things that just in management in general you learn is, people go from managing themselves, being individual contributors, to managing a team, and that's a big transition, to managing teams of teams, to finally you're managing people who are managing people who are managing teams of teams.
Exactly.
And did you find that my friend Whitney Johnson talks about jumping on S-curves? Did you find that what was that like for you when you had to step into one of these new roles and learn all this new stuff?
Yeah, it's funny. I talk about it in my book in terms of every time you take a big leap in your career, you end up at the bottom rung of the learning curve ladder, right? Exactly. Which should be expected. So it's no surprise that we get there and we think, oh my God, right? And we get imposter syndrome and we feel like, oh no, they're going to figure out I don't know what the heck I'm doing. I mean, we have all this stuff that comes flowing into our brains, right? Well, of course. And no, and they don't expect us to know everything. So the good news is just know you're not alone. Everybody feels that way. I tell people, if you don't feel uncomfortable several times within a quarter or so, then you're just not learning. Because every time you feel uncomfortable, it's really just your body's energy way of saying, okay, I don't know everything right this second. And you know what? Great. Because if you know everything every second, you are not learning and you are not pushing yourself. So it is perfectly fine to feel the, oh my God, right? Every once in a while, we should all feel it, because then that's when you grow the absolute most as you pay attention. So, how did I deal with it? Same way everybody did. I was like, okay, first you get that sweeping feel of, they're going to figure out that I don't really know what I'm doing, right? So you get that whole imposter syndrome piece, which I do also talk about in the book. But then, the way I've always approached that is, okay, they wouldn't have given me the job if they didn't think I could do it. All right. So believe them when they tell me that I can do this job. 2, everybody feels this way at some point. So this is not unique to me. It's just something that happens. So I can kind of deal with it. 3, I try to fake it until I make it. So I just act like I know what I'm doing. And then eventually I will. So, and then the other thing I have, and I think it's so important for everybody, is to have cheerleaders. And when I say cheerleaders, Rita, I mean real cheerleaders. Rah, rah, go, go, cheerleader, which is somebody you call up and you're feeling like, OMG, right? And they're the ones that say, Shellye, you're capable. You've got this. You've done X, you've done Y, you've done Z. You're perfect. I mean, they give you that whole pep talk thing, right? You need cheerleaders because so much in the world, forget just business, so much in the world is telling us, especially women and people of color, but they're telling us we're not all that all the time. We're not smart enough. We're not, we're not technical enough. We're not, thin enough. We're not pretty enough. We're not tall enough. We're not young enough. You fill in the blank. We are not enough. Okay. The world tells us that every day. So of course we need people in our corner saying, oh, yes, you are. Oh, yes, you are. Because when times are really hard, we start believing the world.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, the world doesn't know who you are. The world has no clue. So, you just got to put that stuff aside. You know who you are. The people who love you, they know who you are. So lean on them to remind you when you need to be reminded.
That's such good advice. That's such good advice. One sort of along those lines, something that comes up a lot in the discussions I have with women are finding mentors, but more importantly, finding sponsors. Did you go about that strategically? Were you sort of checking out the people that you think could, in a good way? I'm not talking about being, doing it, but were you sort of very intentional about that, or was that more kind of it came with the package, or how did that work for you?
Yeah, no, so I'll be candid. Initially, I didn't really understand the difference between, I'll call mentors and sponsors. I really got lucky. Probably, I don't even know, 6 years into my career, 5 years into my career, something like that. I was at IBM, and IBM decided that, okay, for their high potential employees, they wanted to make sure they had mentors. But they had the brilliant idea of having their the mentees, people identified, say, who would you like to be your mentor? And we'll help facilitate that, right? Okay. So I got asked. I said, great. I looked around and said, all right. I picked a guy. His name was Roland Harris. He was a couple levels above me. I knew him. And I thought, okay, I think he likes me. I'll pick Roland. Well, Roland calls me up like several days later. Shellye. And I said, hey, Roland. He says, Shellye, you put me down to be your mentor. And I'm thinking, he's not very happy. And I said, well, yeah, Roland, I thought you liked me. And he said, Shellye, you've got me. Go get somebody else. And I was like, oh.
Oh, that's super interesting.
So what that did for me, and literally that's all he said. We didn't have a long conversation. It was just literally, that was it. But I really listened to what he said. And here's what I heard. I heard 2 things. 1, I have mentors that I don't even know I have. 2, I can have as many as I want. So I took both those things and just put it on steroids. And I just started adopting mentors all over the place. And then what happens, that's why I said the reason I didn't really understand the difference between mentor and sponsor, because one of the things that started happening to me is people who, I might adopted and treated like a mentor, well, as they're moving up and things are happening, I was moving up and doing well, they would actually start claiming me. We never had formal relationships, but, oh, Shellye, oh, yeah, I give her advice and counsel from time to time. Oh, Shellye, yeah. And so they became sponsors. Because they were now proud of the impact that they were having, right? And the way, it's funny, let me just share one piece
Sure.
for those who are listening, because this is just so critical. And by the way, I talk about how to do this in the book. The key here is not just taking advice. So many people go and they take advice from people and they think that's how you create a mentoring relationship. Not. A relationship by definition is two-way, not one way. When you're just taking, it's one way. And guess what? The people you're taking from are going to feel used and they're not going to be helpful over time. You have to actually give them something too, right? So it has to be a two-way street in order for it to work. But the book talks about how to get that done. So anyway,
that's
sponsors, that's how I see it.
Yeah, that's so important, because one of the things I read about in my work is that the more senior you get, the harder it is to get unfiltered information. And so one of the things I counsel the typically younger women in my programs is, you have insight nobody else has. You have a perspective nobody else has. You may see things that are incredibly valuable that you could be bringing into those conversations. So when you think about the context of giving back, there's a lot there. I love this idea of they were claiming you, though. That's great.
Yeah, it really was. It really was. And listen, Rita, I completely agree with the point that you're making. One of the things that I like to say is, as you rise in organizations, you have to listen harder, because people don't tell you, or they whisper, or they hint, right? They don't tell you, so you really have to listen. But you also have to speak softer, because you don't realize that what you say gets magnified, right, out there. And if you're not careful, you can cause behavior in an organization that you have no idea you actually created, because somebody heard that you wanted something, or you made a side comment about interested in something, and next thing you know, it's like there's a whole initiative going off. So listen harder, speak softer as you go.
That's great advice. That's great advice. So walk us through the book. Sort of take us on that journey. I would be very interested to hear.
Absolutely. Well, I start out by really trying to share what made Shellye Shellye.
Okay.
And it was clear to me early in life, Rita, that the odds just weren't in my favor. I grew up in the racially charged 60s, an environment that told me very clearly that I was really not wanted. And you were
one of five children, right?
What's that?
You were one of five children?
One of four. Yeah, one of four children, but my parents were crazy. They had 4 kids in less than 5 years.
Whoa.
So it was, I mean, literally.
That's determination.
I'm telling you. So the good news is we grew up very close and tight, because we were very close in age. Also very competitive, which I think has helped, because I definitely am competitive and I definitely like to win. So therefore, I realized that if I just did what everybody else does, I wasn't going to get much. So I needed to figure out how to improve my odds. And I spent my whole life basically being about what I do and always working towards goals. Mm-hmm. And frankly, that approach has helped me professionally and personally. So in the book, I talk about that. And then I talk about really kind of each stage in terms of, all right, as you start your career, setting yourself up to actually achieve the things that you want to achieve. I talk about building the plan, living the plan, and then when stuff doesn't go as expected, and what do you do? And I talk about trade-offs that you have to make. Talk about the whole imposter syndrome, right? All those things in terms of in the early years. And then I talk about challenges that I personally faced as a result. I also talk about how once you get to senior levels, right now, how do you navigate, right, in those roles? I talk about, we moved. I don't even know many times I moved with my family and my kids. Maybe half a dozen, 6, 7 times. We moved a bunch. And all that brings, right? And the trade-offs that you make, right, around it. I talk about how I got my first board seat, right? How strategically I went after it. So the book is really about the strategies and approaches, as well as very specific tactics and techniques for improving your odds to get what you want out of life, professionally and personally. Because this whole notion of I have my work hat, I have my personal hat, I think is baloney. I honestly think this whole work-life balance terminology itself was just designed to make us feel perpetually guilty. Because what is a balance? What is a balance? A balance is fixed, right? You got to pull up, you've got to balance even on all sides at all times. That's what balance is. Life does not work that way. It doesn't. So from the get-go, you're failing if that's your measurement, right? So no, that's ridiculous. I believe that I am one person. My life is personal. My life is professional. It is integrated. I need to look at it, do the set of priorities in total, and then prioritize what I'm going to go do, and frankly, what I'm not. And that's how you get things done. So I talk about that kind of thing also within the book.
That's wonderful. So you're married, you have kids?
I was married for over 34 years.
Oh, wow.
Unfortunately, my husband passed away from cancer last year.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did not know that.
Yes. No, that's okay.
And so he's married to this, force of nature. How did you navigate? Because one of the things my friend Aviva Wittenberg-Cox talks about a lot is that, sometimes the biggest barrier to women's advancements are the people they share beds with. And I think there's a lot to be learned about how to have those conversations, because it's easy for your partner to say, yes, absolutely, I support you, go for it. But then it's, well, that means we have to move to Japan for 2 years. It's like, hang on, you need to do what?
Yeah.
So how did you have those conversations?
Well, first of all, I'm a big believer in communications. And like I said, I've been intentional my whole life. Before I even got engaged, I talked to my then ultimately became husband about what my aspirations were in life, about what I wanted to accomplish, about how, we talked about how we saw life working. We talked about all of that so that we were a team. My career became our career plan. And we worked in partnership all the way through. But I tell people to this day, I'm amazed at how many couples don't actually have those kind of conversations before they, start off on a long-term marriage. And even early in marriage, still don't talk about it. They wait until things actually happen. And that's hard. That's really hard. So I think the number one, way to improve the odds that you can actually work through those kinds of decisions and make trade-offs that everybody feels happy about and nobody feels that they sacrificed, right, for, is talking about it up front, talking about it at least early, or even eventually, even if you've been married 10 years and you still haven't talked about it, you should talk about it now. But share, here's what I think I'd like to do. Here's how I see our future. I think a lot of divorces happen because people's vision of the future is not the same. So create that shared vision and then work together on it. My success was my husband's success, right? Things he did, we were very much a team. And so that actually made it much, much easier, right? All the way through, because it wasn't like we're having the conversation for the first time. When it came to move to Japan, he was like, fantastic. Because here's what this meant, and here's what this meant, and it took us closer to, here's the overall goal. So yeah, that's, and anyway, I talk about those things too in the book, because like I said, I don't see how it's separate. So if you are ambitious, there are things to do to help you.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point. What was he doing through?
Sure. So my husband, when we actually met at IBM. He was in management, et cetera, and we met. So he and I both worked for IBM for a while, had both kids, and then we had talked about this. Then when he got to the point where he then stayed home and was doing consulting, so that he could be the primary person responsible for the kids. And then we got to the point where he just stayed home full time with the kids.
Wow. So that was a team effort.
It was, absolutely was.
That's amazing.
He was amazing.
Yeah, it sounds it. It really sounds it. So why do you think it is that people don't do that? Like, I mean, one of the things that as you lay it out, right, it sounds so completely clear. And, if you're starting from behind, you have to figure out how to turn the odds in your favor and all these sorts of things. And yet, I get these rooms virtual rooms now full of women, and they're not having those conversations, and they're not sort of saying, this is my stake in the ground. And they're not, it just, there's an almost reluctance to say that. And then there was a wonderful book written some years back, and the title of the book was How Not to Hate Your Husband After Having Kids. But it was about this exact issue, which is like all of a sudden this bomb drops from the sky and you have this creature you're now responsible for, and all kinds of things happen that nobody really planned and didn't anticipate. And I wonder why you think that is.
Yeah. So first of all, I think it's scary, and you have to be vulnerable to actually have those conversations. And many people are afraid and uncomfortable just sharing what their real aspirations are. It's a secret. Deep down, this is what I'd really like to do. And I'll mentor people or talk to people, and I'll say, "Oh, wow, that's great. Who knows?" Well, maybe their husband knows, maybe a friend knows. Not many people know. And why is that? I think it's because when you put it out there, then two things. One, if it doesn't happen, you feel like a failure. If you put it out there and other people think it's ridiculous, right? Then you feel, the wrath or the what should I say? The pushback, right? Or whatever. People are like, are you crazy? And again, as I said, we are judged on so many things already, and putting that out there just adds another thing for people to judge me on, right? So I understand, absolutely understand why people don't. And even in a relationship, sometimes it's one of those things you just want to put off because you're afraid of how that might actually go or what might actually happen, even if you haven't admitted it to yourself. So, it's understandable. But at the same time, courage is a muscle. Nobody is born with courage. Mother Nature makes sure of that. All right. I mean, because we had to, if the species is going to survive, we as humans, we can't protect ourselves for like the first, 3 years of life. We can do nothing to protect ourselves. So Mother Nature, from the beginning, it is flight. We're scared, we run. We're scared, we yell. We're scared. I mean, that is built in, hardwired. So when you see anybody who's courageous, they have developed that. It is a muscle, which means you can too. You can too. You do not. I was not born courageous. How do you do that? It's by taking the first doing, something that you're uncomfortable with. So you do it once and you realize, I didn't die.
That worked.
Oh my God, right?
Oh my God.
Exactly. I'm okay. I'm still standing, right? I mean, right? And then you kind of do it again. But yeah, I think building courage is something that's so important, but it's not something we talk about much, or even encouraged to actually do. But I think that's a key element. So I understand there's not much around us that supports us taking all these risks. But I've always believed that risk and reward, risk and opportunity, two sides of the same coin. If you don't take the risk, you're not going to get, the upside.
So I want to pick up on this theme of courage because it's something that I struggle with a lot. And I do a lot of work on innovation and growth. And obviously these are highly uncertain things. And, you talk to these senior leaders and they're people in incredibly senior positions. They're in C-suites, they're in boards, and they're like, oh, and it's absolutely clear to me like what this company needs to do, or eventually the story is not going to end well, right? I mean, it's totally clear. And I lay it all out for them and they agree, right? And then I say, okay, well, if we all agree, these are the action steps that are going to be necessary to execute against that common understanding. And they freeze in the headlights. And then it's back to, oh yeah, that was a great strategy meeting, but now we're going to go back to the budget and it's politics and it's, I really do think it sometimes comes down to a lack of courage.
Yes. Yep. I completely agree. So the cool thing is, if you can build courage as actually a strength, or, honestly, for me, it's one of my superpowers. People talk about superpowers. I'm telling you, courage is absolutely one of them. Courage. And the second one is discipline. Pardon me. Second one is discipline. But if you can build it, it's amazing how much it can help you. Everywhere. I mean, in the boardroom, I honestly, I get feedback positive feedback on my courage even in the boardroom, because I will put things on the table, right? Or I will say things. I will, when everybody's thinking it. But again, it's a risk, because if you say it and then it doesn't go over well, you get, right, the flack for that.
Right.
So it's all a risk. And trust me, that doesn't mean that I haven't been courageous and done something and then felt, well, that didn't work, right? Or that ended up being kind of stupid. Does that happen? Absolutely. Good news is it happens a whole lot less than when it actually makes an impact, right? Or works. So I keep doing it anyway.
That makes sense. It makes perfect sense. So one of the things that you've been very public about is at this pivotal moment, so we've got 4 inflection points, right? We've got a global pandemic. We've got a global economic meltdown. We've got this racial justice set of issues really being put very much before people. And underlying it all, we've got an environmental crisis that people are just kind of going, hama, 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 I don't want to hear it. Do you think this could be a moment for real change? I mean, when I look at, for example, I was studying actually IBM under Gerstner, which I think was the largest document that I know of anyway, a large company that made a real effort to be more, what's the right word? Be a real effort towards not just diversity, but also inclusion. And they actually scored managers on it. And, it was the first case I had read about. But all too often these things are like, all right, we'll do the unconscious bias training and we tick that box and then we move on. Do you think we really are at a moment of change now, real change?
So I will tell you, I am cautiously optimistic.
Okay.
And let me I'll explain the what should I say, the qualifier. The reason I'm optimistic, I'll do that first, and I'll tell you why I'm cautious. Mm-hmm. I'm optimistic because for the first time, the people who are out there, whether it's protesting or writing or just communicating that this is not right, reflects the entire country. Right? There's a diversity of people out there that reflect the country. It's not just, if you talk about racial justice and racial equity, it's not just Blacks leading the charge, there's a few other people, right? It reflects the country. So I'm like, okay, that's one. 2, businesses for the first time, are getting engaged in the conversation. During the civil rights movement, businesses sat on the sideline. This is a government issue. This time they're actually getting engaged. And businesses have more power, I personally believe, than they even realize. It's amazing to me that businesses don't use their power more. But the fact that they're actually at least acting like that they want to see change, I think is a positive. Now, the reason I'm cautious is because we tend to get tired.
Yeah.
We tend to get tired as a country. So whatever the issue is, we'll put a lot of energy around it for several months and then, I'm tired. And you go on to the next thing. Well, it's taken us 400 years to get to where we are on the racial situation in the country. And we're not going to fix it in 8 months.
No.
So that's why my word is cautious. Now, that said, here's where it's important to use the power. I think it's really important for people who sit in boardrooms, right? They can actually make sure that this stays top of mind and a focus for companies.
Absolutely.
Right? So if we do the right job and keep companies engaged, companies have a huge impact on everything, not just the jobs and roles that we have. Companies are the biggest taxpayers for local governments. All right? If we use that power to say, this isn't okay, right? This is not okay. So what are we doing about this locally? Forget nationally for a minute, just locally. There's a lot of power that businesses can actually exert, just asking for the right things, right, to be done. So if we can keep that focus, then I think we can start to change the trajectory and make some progress. But if we don't, it'll just be, another thing that kind of came and went.
Yeah.
And that would just be horrific, because prior to this time, people could say, I just didn't know.
Yeah.
Right? Now everybody knows.
Yeah.
So if we decide not to do anything to fix it, then what we're saying as society is we're okay living in a society where people have different levels of whether or not they're really a human being. It should be treated as a human being. We'll have the level for one set of people, another level for another set of people, another level for, and we're okay with that. Well, That would be a horrible indictment on our country if we consciously agree that that's okay.
Agree. I read a statistic in a piece you were quoted in, that 1 in 3 Black men are going to at some point in their lives face incarceration. My head exploded. I was like, what? I had no idea. That I did not know.
Yep.
And that's a structural issue. I mean, that's not,
Yep. I know. Listen, it's horrific. My son-in-law graduated from Morehouse. He manages a $40 million investment fund, right? The whole bit. He has had 25 police encounters.
What?
He's 36 years old. And 5 years of those 36 years, he lived out of the country. Just to give you an idea.
Wow.
Yeah, people don't know because we don't talk about it.
Right.
But yes, it's horrific.
So board level questions, I think,
yes,
are very penetrating. And one of the things I've been pushing, and this actually is, so I think the racial justice conversation is very much, to me, intertwined with the economic justice conversation. And I've been doing quite a bit of research on that. And my friend Zeynep Tom, who runs a thing called the Good Jobs Institute, makes the observation that we have 40, I think the number is 45 million people in this country who earn less than $15 an hour. And that is not a livable wage. And one of the points she makes that I think is so important is that we see sort of the worth of a person who will pay $15 an hour for that person, right? What we don't see is because that person, who may be very capable, is working 2 jobs and has kids at home and is a single parent, is simply not going to be a functional employee. So it's not a one-way causality, right? So
exactly.
I think, and one of the things she recommends, and I think we need to do this, is report out. I get the boards asking, how much are we paying? What's the racial and ethnic breakdown of who we're paying by what level? And I think if boards started asking, management would start paying more attention to it.
I completely agree. It is something we talk about at my boards and my companies. Mm-hmm. And that's where the whole thing about courage comes in. Because you're right. It needs to be asked and discussed everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And credit given to those that get it right. You may remember a few years ago, Mark Bertolini at Aetna, a lot of times it's not willful, it's kind of ignorant, right? That he actually was confronted by, I believe it was a group of employees who said, we can't make this work. We can't even afford our own health plan. And he arbitrarily basically raised the wages of everybody in the company to a minimum wage of $16 an hour. And the business press went crazy. They went haywire. They were like, this is going to destroy your company and your shareholders are going to revolt and all this.
Right.
All this.
And none of that happened. Happened. They created tremendous value for shareholders under Mark. Yeah, Mark, and I know Mark.
Oh, yeah,
that was fantastic. But there are a lot of companies that are doing it. Hey, pardon me. Allergies. PayPal is another one, right? Under Diane Schulman. They've also done the similar thing in terms of making sure people are actually making a living wage. So there are a lot of companies. Verizon looks at that. All these companies, right? Nordstrom is announced, and these are all companies that I'm engaged with, but I sit on the board of Verizon, Nordstrom, Roper Technologies, and Okta. And Nordstrom announced last year pay equity. They've done it, right? They've gone through the numbers. We have pay equity, right, across the company. So things can be done.
Mm-hmm. And do you think it's just laziness, or we don't want to put the energy into this, or
honestly, it's like anything else. You just have to be intentional. So now it's not in the top priority to figure out how to actually make that work. And I know companies will say, well, gosh, then we can't run our company, right, if this is the case. And then I personally, and I'm sure this is a bit of blasphemy, my view is then redo the business model. We heard, so anyway.
No, I think you're absolutely right. If you're running a business that relies on slave labor, basically, that's not an economically viable thing for anybody. Very, very, very interesting. So one of the things Zeynep's really working on is, she said, a lot of the new jobs that are going to be created in this country right now are service jobs. And she said, we have to figure out how to make service jobs good jobs, because, training is not going to dig us out of this, So more broadly, do you think we could be on the cusp of, I'll call it a new social contract or a new expectation of business that they're going to be good citizens. I mean, we've had this huge debate, the business roundtable sort of saying, okay, we're not going to run ourselves just for shareholders. We're going to be more stakeholder balanced, and a huge amount of controversy. I think it was 81 companies did not agree to sign up to that seemingly innocuous pledge to look after stakeholders. And one of the things I'm concerned about is it's a bit like the Sullivan Principles back in the days of apartheid in South Africa. Well, companies sort of signed up to the Sullivan Principles, job done, check mark, and then that was sort of ground cover, for whatever they wanted to do. And it didn't really lead to the kind of systematic change that took very concerted activism to create in that country. Do you think we're on the brink of something like that here, where business is actually starting to say, wait a minute, this is not good for anybody?
I think two things are happening, and I just want to check. Are you guys hearing too much background noise, or is it okay?
I think we're okay.
All right. So one, I applaud the Business Roundtable. So it's been just about a year since they made the announcement that the role of a corporation is not just to the shareholders, right? But to the shareholders, to the stakeholders, to employees, to suppliers, to the community, right? I mean, it's the whole breadth, right, to customers. And I really applaud. And I think that is the right way that it should be looked at. One of the reasons why I'm actually optimistic that you'll see more companies like that is because in general, we tend to have a talent shortage in a lot of key areas. Not everywhere, but a lot of key areas, which means employees can choose with their feet where they want to work. And I think that starts to shift power, if you will, to hold companies accountable, because they know if they want to attract the best talent, they're going to have to create an environment in which these employees actually want to work. And I so applaud, people talk about the current generation, Gen Z, millennial, whatever. I am so excited about these generations. They are so much more focused on all the things that we messed up. They're so much focused on the environment, right? They're focused on society in general, right? Do well, but also do good, all of that, which is phenomenal. And I think they're going to indeed have to bring companies with them. Other companies are going to find that they're not going to have people to hire that they want to hire. So I do think that we're on the cusp with regards to a broader shift of companies also trying to be, frankly, just good corporate citizens.
And they might suffer penalties if they're not. So one of the points that my friend Jeff Pfeffer, who's a professor at Stanford, makes, and Zeynep as well, is when we look at the wage, right? You can have very low wages and have an incredibly high cost of labor because of turnover and presenteeism and anxiety. And Jeff makes the observation that if you wanted to, you could find out, for example, from your pharmacy benefits provider what part of your organization is, outsized in terms of its use of antidepressants or anxiety drugs or certain kinds of procedures. If you wanted to look, the data are there. And his somewhat cynical perspective is people don't want to know. And I think it's really got to almost get to the board level where there's someone holding the organization accountable for things like, do we have toxic managers in place? Are we having practices that don't let people really contribute their full value, that kind of thing? And I think it's kind of interesting. So we've got boards that could exercise some influence on this, right? Direct the attention of management, as it were. Are there other levers that we should be thinking about, sort of pulling as we try to get a more just, equitable situation?
Yeah, I think employees have, again, a lot of power. We've seen situations where employees have walked out of businesses or made big social media pushes, whatever, and companies are forced to respond. So, at the end of the day, company leadership, shareholders, they actually want a company that is sustainably and consistently delivering results. And you can only do that if you've actually got a really good, motivated, right, employee base. Yeah. So it's really just everyone making sure their voices are heard, their concerns are known, right? Those kinds of things. I think the vast majority of companies want to be running a good company. Companies are not entities. They are people. They are just people all together. So we're all people. So it's not them, right? It is us. So if we think the environment's not the way it should be, then we need to do something about it. And if it's making sure we're raising it up to management, we're reporting issues, we're holding each other accountable for behavior, whatever it might be. But everybody has power to use.
And that comes back to courage again, right? To have the power to exert that courage. I think that's really an important message, really important. So I'd love to get your perspective on sort of the kind of, we're at this really weird moment right now where a lot of women are at home with their beloved partners and with their children and with everybody who's near and dear to them. It's very hard to get anything done in those circumstances. And I get asked a lot, do I think that this is going to be a setback for professional women, or do I think it's going to sort of break down some of these norms that have created the career structures we have, where it's sort of this ratchet effect, right? So if you miss a turn sort of down here, you never get back on the track again. From where you sit, what do you see as possible scenarios?
You know, I honestly believe, in terms of, as we look at what companies are doing, that the right behaviors in terms of will come through if they're properly incented. So, Rita, it's interesting to me. I'd love to hear even from you, like an example of the kind of thing that you're talking about in terms of what you're seeing.
Well, a couple of things that I think are, so the issue kind of is depending on where you are in your life, right? So at the early stages, it's just much harder to create those networks, those sponsor engagements and so forth, if you're holed up at home. I mean, I think it can be done, but it's harder.
Okay. So yeah. All right. Then I understand, because it's because when you ask, it's kind of a broad thing. So let me just say in general, with everything that's going on, I personally am very concerned. Mm-hmm. I honestly believe that we are going to see a lot of women fall out of the workforce.
That's what I'm worried about.
Within the next 4 or 5 months, because it is just overwhelming. Women are still carrying the majority of the responsibility at home. And now that it's hard to get help because of COVID, because we're cutting all those things, and all the resources that are usually in place to help and support are kind of not available. In too many households, it's too much of that burden is falling on women. And yes, I think we're going to see a lot of women that are going to step away from the workforce, which is terrible, because we'll be paying that price for years.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the other interesting thing, of course, is demographic. I mean, a lot of them are not only the ones that have families are at risk of dropping out, but a lot of the ones that don't have families are going, I'm going to pause on that, because I see what's happening to people just a couple of career, life stages ahead of me. One of the things I'm hopeful about, and this is something that Aviva and I've talked about a lot, which is if we thought about careers over the course of your whole work life, and we didn't think about careers as having this sort of ratchet where you make it to here and then you make it to there and then you make it to, and like if you fall off the truck, you're lost. But I do see the possibility of women really finding new energy in their 50s and 60s. I mean, we're like seeing that all around us, where women are really restarting careers later on, and I think that's a very interesting development. That's kind of new. I think at one point we thought, women in their 50s, they're all washed up. But now what we're seeing is, no, they're starting businesses. They're joining boards. They're doing all kinds of things.
Well, listen, we're living longer. We are healthier longer, right? Our minds are good and active. So yes, I think it's true. I think it's true for everybody. I think it's true for men and for women. But absolutely.
So we've got about 5 minutes left, and this has just flown. I can't believe that. So 2 things to ask you. If there's a couple of thoughts you'd like to leave our listeners with that you think they should just really, really bear in mind. I think the courage theme is definitely one. And then, how should people get smarter? How can they educate themselves better?
Oh, sure. So a couple things. One, I will tell everyone that I firmly believe that everybody has the capability to achieve their aspirations if they're intentional about it and make trade-offs. Notice I don't say sacrifices. To me, a trade-off, choices, decisions, you own. You keep the power. You make sacrifices, you're basically giving it away to somebody else. How to get educated and things around this world, there are a couple of things. One, you could start with my book, which, by the way, is coming out in all formats. I've seen some chats. It'll be digital, ebook, Audible, which I recorded, as well as
I saw you recording in the studio. That's amazing. So if you get the Audible book, you'll get it Shelley's own voice. Yeah, I didn't do my last book. It sounded overwhelming. Was it overwhelming?
It's a lot of work, but I didn't want anybody else reading my story.
That's good for you.
Yeah, that was the end of the day. I was like, nope, I'm too much of a control person. Like, no, I'm reading this. But anyway, and then, the other is the things I talked about right now. This period of time is really hard for women. It's just really hard because even if you don't have kids, a lot of times because you might be getting asked to do more because you don't have kids. Of course, you have nothing else to do. Number one. The other thing that happens is you're being pulled, family, not just kids, but family. A lot of family needs help. A lot of things need help. And so you get pulled in terms of to all of that as well. So I just want to share the empathy of this time is absolutely hard. So don't keep it all inside. Don't keep it all inside. You need to find, if you can't talk to your partner or your spouse or your mother, find somebody that you can talk to, let it out, etc. Because I'm also very concerned about just the mental health stress from all of this that we are all undergoing, because it is hard. It's a very emotional time for people who are falling into the categories that are definitely being targeted and or focused on right now, etc. So there's just a lot of stress happening. So find your stress relievers and make time, even if it's just 15 minutes. But take time to do something that helps you with self-care. So
and your cheerleaders. And your cheerleaders, I think, are so important. One of the bright spots about this pandemic is, making new friends that are really good friends. I mean, I don't know about you, but, a lot of my life over the last 10, 15 years has been spent on airplanes and in airports. And so I might meet somebody at an airport, but that, other than that, the opportunity to really forge friendships was hard. But now what we're finding is, there's been like maybe 4 or 5 people over the last 6 months who we would have been friendly, but we would have been distant passing in the night. And one is Safi Bakal, who I called up to ask a sort of a question that his expertise was relevant to. We ended up having a lovely 2-hour conversation. I was like, I really got to know this guy. So I think one of the positives that people could be thinking about is, how do I forge some of those new connections that may be different from the way I did it before? And I think that's a positive note.
Mm-hmm.
Positive note.
Yeah,
all right. Final thoughts.
Yeah. Final thoughts are, I write a blog where I share a lot of thoughts, ideas. This is period in my life for me. It's all about impact and inspiration. So if you liked anything that you heard or any perspectives that I've got, number one, yes, please pre-order the book. But follow me on LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever. I'm Shell, Shel, and then Archambeau. I'm the only Shellye Archambeau spelled that way on LinkedIn. So it's easy to find me. Because I try to post things that are inspirational, but also helpful. And I look forward to continuing the dialogue that way.
Absolutely.
But thanks so much for having me, Rita. I absolutely enjoyed our time.